You know, sometimes life throws you a curveball, so hard it shatters everything you thought you knew. But what if that curveball came from your own family? What if they stole your child's future right out from under you because they decided your kid wasn't special enough? That's exactly what happened to me. And let me tell you, when I saw my daughter step out of that helicopter, calm as stone, after years of betrayal and quiet sacrifice, I knew this wasn't just a story of comeuppance. This was a story of defiance. The sound came before anyone could even process it. A low, rhythmic thwop, 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 shaking the very air above my father's farmhouse in Lebanon, Ohio, like a second heartbeat. 43 Dawsons were out in the backfield, paper plates piled high, sun warm on their necks. And every single one of them looked up at the exact same moment. My sister, Tessa, dropped her plate of coleslaw right into the grass. My father, Roy, his bourbon sloshed over the rim of his solo cup, running brown down his wrist, and he didn't even notice, his mouth just hanging open in disbelief. A red and white helicopter, emblazoned with the Life Flight logo, settled into that back field like it had received a personal invitation. And when that pilot door swung open, and my daughter Megan stepped out in a flight suit, helmet tucked under her arm, she was 25 years old. And she was calm as a lake on a windless morning. But to truly understand that moment, I need to take you back 7 years. Hey everyone, Hadley here. I'm 40, an accountant, and a single mom from Dayton, Ohio. And this is a story of how my father tried to steal my daughter's future, and how she built a better one without asking permission, or waiting for it. If you've ever been told your kid isn't special enough, if you've ever watched someone else decide what your child deserves, then you know this feeling. Stay with me, drop a comment, and make sure you're subscribed. I've been an accountant at Morrison & Birch in Dayton for 9 years. Numbers are my language. I thrive on columns that balance, ledgers that reconcile, tax returns filed on time and correct to the penny. My ex-husband left when Megan was 4. No long story there, honestly. He left. I stayed. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on Troy Street, brown carpet, window unit that rattled every July, and I raised my daughter in that apartment with a regularity some people might have mistaken for boring. But here's what wasn't boring: the savings account I opened right after he walked out. Megan was 4. I was 19. $200 a month. Sometimes $250 when overtime came through, occasionally $300 during tax season when the firm paid bonuses. 14 years of deposits. I kept a spreadsheet on the refrigerator, printed and updated every single month, tracking every dollar since 2005. Other moms had Pinterest boards for birthday parties and vacation plans. I had a savings tracker held up by an Ohio-shaped magnet. By the time Megan was 18, that account held $47,000. Not a fortune, no, but it was something. That was braces and skipped vacations. That was the year I drove a car with no air conditioning because the repair estimate was $600, and $600 was 3 months of deposits. Every line on that spreadsheet was a decision, a sacrifice, a promise, the kind of promise you make in a quiet apartment when nobody is watching and nobody is going to thank you for it. There was just one detail I hadn't thought about in years, a detail that would end up costing me everything. I was 19 when I opened that account, and the bank required a cosigner. My father, Roy, put his name on it. His name was still on it. I never removed it. I never thought I'd need to. Megan, at 17, was a B-plus student who never made the honor roll and never got called to the principal's office. Teachers wrote the same thing every year on her report cards. Megan is a pleasure to have in class. Pleasant, cooperative, invisible in the way quiet kids become invisible when the loud ones take up all the oxygen. But here's what the report cards didn't capture. When Megan was 8, I took her to an air show at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, just 20 minutes from our apartment. She stood at the fence line for 3 hours. Didn't ask for a hot dog, didn't ask to leave, didn't fidget. She watched those helicopters with a stillness that made the man next to us actually ask if she was okay. She was more than okay. She was memorizing. By 12, she had a poster of a UH-60 Blackhawk taped above her bed, 3 model helicopter kits built from scratch on her dresser, and a library card she used almost exclusively for aviation books. She never announced a dream, never came downstairs and said, "Mom, I want to be a pilot," the way kids do in movies, breathless and wide-eyed with background music swelling. She just collected information. Flight manuals from used bookstores. YouTube videos of Army pilots talking through pre-flight checklists, a spiral notebook with sketches of instrument panels labeled in her small, neat handwriting. She never told me what she wanted to be. She just quietly became it, one library book at a time, one model kit at a time, one afternoon at the fence line at a time. And I watched, and I kept making deposits. My father, Roy Dawson, is 65 years old and has never once in his life asked a question when he could give an order instead. He retired from construction after 40 years as a foreman, which means he spent 4 decades telling men where to dig, what to pour, and when to stop. He lives in a farmhouse outside Lebanon, Ohio, with my mother, Patrice, who has perfected the art of standing behind him while saying nothing useful. Then there's my sister. Tessa is 44, twice divorced, and has spent her adult life borrowing money from our father while pretending she doesn't. She resents me. Always has. I'm the reliable one, the one who shows up, the one who pays her own bills, and Tessa treats that like a personal insult. Hadley was always the steady one, she told people at Thanksgiving once, smiling with her teeth. I got the personality. Her son, Bryce, was 19 that year. SAT score, 1520. Genuine talent. And Yale had accepted him. My father framed that acceptance letter and hung it on the wall of his den like it was a deed to new land. First Dawson to touch the Ivy League. But here's the math that nobody discussed at the celebration dinner. Yale tuition ran $85,000 a year. Bryce's financial aid covered roughly half. Tessa was broke. Her second husband's alimony had dried up, and my father had burned through his retirement helping Tessa stay afloat for years. So, Roy called a family meeting. Drove down to Dayton to pick me up like it was a casual thing. Just need to talk about some family business, Hadley girl. When my dad says, family meeting, someone's about to lose something. I just didn't know it would be me. There were 4 of us at the kitchen table in the farmhouse. Roy at the head, naturally. Patrice to his right, her hands folded like she was in church. Tessa across from me, bouncing her knee, already defensive. The Yale acceptance letter sat in its frame at the center of the table, propped up like a piece of evidence at trial. Roy laid it out plain. Bryce needed $47,000 to cover the tuition gap for his first year. The family had to step up. Once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Roy said, tapping the table with his index finger the way he always did when he wanted you to understand he was not negotiating. I felt the number before he said it. $47,000. The exact balance in Megan's account. That's Megan's college fund, I said. I kept my voice even. Flat. The way I talk to clients at work when the IRS sends a letter and panic won't help. Roy didn't blink. Megan can go to community college. She's a good kid, but she's not Yale material. Bryce is. Tessa leaned forward with her elbows on the table. Bryce could change this family's name, Hadley. What's Megan going to do with that money? Get her CPA. She said CPA the way someone might say bus pass. Patrice placed her hand on my arm. Gentle. Rehearsed. Your father knows best, sweetheart. He's thought about this. I looked at the 3 of them. My father who built things, my mother who stood behind him, and my sister who always needed more. The Yale letter gleamed under the kitchen light. My daughter's 14 years of deposits sat in a bank account 20 minutes away. I said, no. Roy absorbed the word the way a foreman absorbs a delay, with a pause and a recalculation. He didn't raise his voice right away. He placed both palms flat on the table and pushed himself up to standing, and the chair scraped back across the linoleum with a sound that made Patrice flinch. I saved that money for 14 years, I said. Dollar by dollar, deposit by deposit. That is my daughter's future sitting in that account. He looked at me from the full height of his 6 feet 1 inch frame. And his face was not angry. That was the worst part. It wasn't anger. It was certainty. The absolute bedrock conviction of a man who has decided something and cannot conceive of being wrong. Your girl will never need it. He said it the way you'd say the sky is blue. She's a sweet kid, Hadley, but she's average. Average kids don't need $47,000. They need a decent job and a husband who works. I heard Patrice exhale behind me. A small breath, almost a sigh. Agreement in the shape of air. Tessa was smiling. Not a cruel smile, not exactly. The smile of someone who believes they've already won and is just waiting for the loser to catch up. I looked at my father, and I understood with perfect clarity that this was not a conversation. It had never been a conversation. It was a verdict delivered at a kitchen table in a farmhouse in Lebanon, Ohio. And the only role I was supposed to play was acceptance. I picked up my purse. This conversation is over. I drove back to Dayton, doing exactly the speed limit, both hands on the wheel, jaw locked. I believe it was over. I was wrong by about 36 hours. 2 days later, I called the bank. I wanted Roy's name removed from the account. The woman on the phone was polite in that careful way bank employees get when they know they're about to ruin your morning. Both signers needed to be present. Earliest appointment tomorrow afternoon, 2:15. I said, fine. I set a reminder on my phone. I went to bed thinking I'd handle it like I handled everything, methodically on schedule, one step at a time. The next morning, I opened my banking app at 7:45 while the coffee brewed. I saw the number and set the phone on the counter the way you set down something fragile. Balance, $0. Roy had walked into the Lebanon branch at 9 a.m. the previous day and withdrawn $47,000 in cash. $47,000. He beat me by one business day. I called him. He picked up on the second ring. Come as Sunday. It's done, he said. Bryce starts in September. I hung up. I called Tessa. She answered, laughing already, mid-sentence with someone in the background. You took my daughter's future, I said. There was a pause. Then Tessa said it. Light and easy, the way someone swats a fly. Oh, relax, Hadley. Some kids are just ordinary. She'll be fine. I stood in my kitchen, holding the phone and staring at the spreadsheet on my refrigerator. Every line, every month. 200 in January, 250 in March, 300 in December when the bonus came. 14 years of rows, and every one of them now equaled nothing. I heard the front door. Megan came in from school, dropped her backpack, and saw me at the kitchen table, staring at the spreadsheet. She stood there for a long time. Mom, I'll figure it out. $47,000. 14 years of $200 deposits, gone in one morning. Because a man who never saved a dime decided my daughter wasn't worth the investment. If you've ever watched someone else spend what you built, if you've ever been told your child doesn't measure up, you already know the fire that sits in your chest like a brick you can't swallow. Stay with me, because this is where things start to change. I drove to the farmhouse that evening. Didn't call ahead. Roy was on the porch in his recliner with a glass of iced tea, and he looked up at me the way a man looks at whether he's already decided won't last. You stole from your own granddaughter, I said from the bottom of the porch steps. I didn't go up, didn't cross the threshold. Roy set his tea down. I invested in the one who deserved it. That was my daughter's name on that spreadsheet. Every line, every month. 14 years. Patrice appeared behind the screen door. She was drying a dish with a checkered towel, and her face was arranged in that particular expression she uses when something uncomfortable is happening and she needs it to stop. Don't make a scene, Hadley. I'm not making a scene, Mom. I'm stating a fact. He took money that belonged to Megan and gave it to Tessa's son, and you stood there and watched. Patrice went back inside. The screen door clapped shut. Roy picked up his tea again. I left. In the car, I hit the steering wheel once with the heel of my palm, hard enough to make it sting. Then I breathed. I drove home. I got on my laptop and searched. How to remove cosigner from joint savings account, then recourse for unauthorized withdrawal from joint account, and then family theft Ohio law. The lawyer I called the next morning told me what I already suspected, but needed to hear from someone with a law degree. Joint account means both names have equal access. Roy's withdrawal was legal. There was no case, no crime, just a man in a bank and a balance of $0. I closed the laptop and made dinner. That evening, I sat Megan down on the couch and told her everything. I used plain words because she deserved plain words. Grandpa took your college fund. All of it. He gave it to Aunt Tessa for Bryce's tuition at Yale. Megan sat with her hands between her knees and looked at the carpet for about 20 seconds. I know, Mom. My stomach dropped. You know. I heard you on the phone 2 days ago when you called Aunt Tessa. These walls aren't thick. 20 seconds of silence stretched between us, feeling like 20 minutes. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to promise I would fix it. I wanted to cry into my hands while my 17-year-old daughter watched and felt scared and uncertain, which is exactly why I didn't. I'm so sorry, baby. That money was yours. Megan looked up. Her eyes were dry, and there was something behind them I hadn't seen before. Something steady and clear, like a compass needle finding north. You saved for 14 years. That's not nothing, Mom. That's everything. But the money is gone. So I'll find another way. She didn't say it dramatically. She said it the way she said most things. Quietly, with the weight in the words instead of the volume. Then she stood up, walked to the kitchen, turned on the faucet, and washed the dishes from dinner. When she finished, she dried her hands on the towel hanging from the oven door, said good night, and went to her room. I heard her desk chair roll across the floor. I heard typing, keys clicking, steady and fast. The sound of someone who had already started solving a problem before the rest of us had finished naming it. She'd known for 2 days. She'd already been looking for another way before I found the words to tell her the first way was gone. September came, and Bryce Whitfield went to Yale. Roy threw a send-off party at the farmhouse, catered barbecue, and a sheet cake with blue icing that read Yale-bound. He invited cousins, uncles, aunts, neighbors, the pastor from Lebanon First Baptist. He did not invite me. He did not invite Megan. I found out from my cousin Donna, who called 2 days before. Are you coming Saturday? Linda's making her brisket. I wasn't invited, Donna. A long pause on the line. Oh, was all she said. That Saturday, I cleaned my apartment and balanced my personal checking account while my family celebrated in a field with my daughter's money. Tessa posted on Facebook that evening a photo of Bryce standing at the Yale gate, grinning wide, wearing a Yale hoodie that probably cost $60. Her caption, First Ivy League Dawson, dreams do come true when family invests in the right person. 41 likes, 12 comments, heart emojis, clapping hands. I sat on my couch and scrolled past it. Didn't comment, didn't like, didn't block. Blocking would have meant it mattered enough to take action. Megan walked through the living room, glanced at my phone screen over my shoulder, and stopped. She studied the photo for about 3 seconds. That's a nice gate, she said. Then she went upstairs. I almost laughed. Almost. The next Monday, I sent birthday cards to Roy and Patrice. Same as every year, because that was who I was, and I was not going to let them turn me into someone else. Megan started waking up at 5:30 in the morning. Running. Push-ups in her bedroom. Pull-ups on a bar she mounted in her closet doorframe. Just getting ready, she said when I asked. She didn't say for what. Over the next few months, I watched my daughter transform without explanation. She borrowed the library printer. So often the librarian started leaving a stack of paper by the machine with Megan's name on a sticky note. Large envelopes appeared in the mailbox addressed to Megan from places I didn't recognize. She exercised every morning with a discipline that reminded me of nobody in our family. I asked once, carefully, the way you open a door when you're not sure who's on the other side. You applying somewhere? A few places. Community college, something like that. She smiled when she said it. And I let it go because I knew my daughter and I knew that smile. It was the same smile she wore at the airshow fence when she was 8 years old. The one that meant she was already somewhere I couldn't follow. I didn't push. I cooked dinner. I went to work. I made my monthly deposit into the new savings account. One evening in November, I brought a glass of water to Megan's room and found her gone. The bathroom. The shower running. Her laptop was open on the desk. I did not mean to look. But I looked. One browser tab glowed on the screen. Army ROTC scholarship. Full tuition plus monthly stipend plus guaranteed flight training slot. I read it twice. My hands went cold the way hands go cold when two opposite feelings hit you at the same time, and your body doesn't know which one to process first. Half fear, half pride. Fear because the word army means your child in places you can't protect her. Pride because my daughter had found a door and was building the key herself. I closed the laptop gently. I went to the kitchen and I cooked dinner. If my daughter was building a door, I wasn't going to knock before she was ready. Thanksgiving at the farmhouse. I went because Patrice begged, and because avoiding your family forever is its own kind of prison. Dinner was tense in the way Midwest dinners are tense, which means everyone smiled and passed the gravy, and nobody mentioned the $47,000 sitting in a Yale dormitory. Megan came with me and sat beside me and ate her turkey in silence. Bryce wasn't home. Midterms. After dessert, the women cleared dishes and the men went to the porch, and I walked outside for air and found Roy alone on the far end, leaning on the railing, staring at the trillion like it owed him something. I should have gone back inside. I didn't. He spoke without turning. My old man told me I'd never be anything. I said nothing. Said Dawsons are born to dig ditches and die poor. Said he was a ditch digger, and his daddy was a ditch digger, and the best I could hope for was a shovel that didn't break. He turned the glass in his hand. I just wanted one of us to prove him wrong. One Dawson who made it to a place where people use your last name with respect. Bryce was supposed to be the one. I stood there and I felt something I did not expect. I understood. Generational trauma is a chain, and every link is a man who was told he was nothing and decided to fix it by choosing which of his descendants was worth something. My father's cruelty had a source. It had a logic. It was the logic of a man who grew up being told he was worthless and responded by ranking everyone around him. I understood why he did it. I still couldn't forgive what it cost. He didn't apologize. He didn't mention Megan. Behind the screen door, Patrice stood in the dark hallway with red eyes, listening to every word. She said nothing. March, a Tuesday. I was cleaning Megan's room while she was at school. The kind of cleaning you do when your kid is 18 and leaving soon, and you want to memorize the shape of her life before it changes. I stripped the bed to wash the sheets, and a large envelope slid out from under the pillow, cream-colored, heavy official. I held it in both hands and already knew. The return address was the University of Cincinnati, Department of Military Science. Inside was a full ROTC acceptance packet, full tuition scholarship, monthly living stipend, and there it was in black print, guaranteed flight training slot upon completion of requirements. My daughter had applied, tested, passed a physical fitness assessment I never knew she took, interviewed with an Army officer I never met, and received a full-ride scholarship to college without asking me for a single thing. Not money, not permission, not approval. Clipped to the front page was a yellow sticky note in Megan's handwriting. I'll fly, Mom. I sat on the edge of her bed with the packet in my lap, and I looked at that sticky note, and then I looked at the Black Hawk poster on her wall, and then I looked at the 3 model kits on her dresser, dusty now. And I understood that everything I thought I knew about my daughter's future had been wrong. Not wrong the way my father meant. Wrong because I had underestimated the reach of a quiet girl who collected information. I placed the packet back under the pillow. I smoothed the sheets over it. I didn't tell anyone. My daughter didn't need $47,000. She needed someone to believe she could fly. And when nobody did, she believed in herself. I opened a new savings account at a different bank. Only my name. First thing I learned, never share a vault. $200 a month. Same as before. Emergency fund. Rebuilding what was taken, column by column, because that is what accountants do. We reconcile. I printed a new spreadsheet and taped it on the refrigerator right next to the old one. The old one stayed. Its last line read $0. And I left it there the way some people leave a scar uncovered, so they remember what cut them. Megan noticed. She came downstairs one morning and stood in front of the refrigerator with a glass of orange juice and studied both pages. 2 spreadsheets now. The old one as a lesson. The new one as a promise. She nodded like that made perfect sense and took her juice upstairs. That spring, Morrison and Birch promoted me to senior accountant. My boss, Gerald, shook my hand and said, "Most reliable person I've ever worked with." I didn't tell him that reliability is what you develop when every other support structure has failed, and the only thing holding the ceiling up is you. I took the raise and increased my monthly deposit to $250. I stopped calling my father. I stopped calling my mother. I stopped calling Tessa. I didn't block any of them. I didn't send a dramatic text or write a letter or announce a boundary on Facebook. I just stopped dialing. Silence, it turns out, is its own boundary. It doesn't require explanation. It doesn't invite negotiation. It simply exists. The same way a locked door exists, and the people on the other side can knock all they want. Megan left for the University of Cincinnati that fall with a duffel bag, her Black Hawk poster, and a sticky note she peeled carefully off the acceptance packet and pressed into her wallet. The news came through Patrice. The way uncomfortable news always travels in families, through the person whose job it is to soften things. Bryce was struggling at Yale. GPA sitting at 2.3. Homesick, calling Tessa 3 times a week in tears. Tessa called me for the first time in a year. Her voice cracked and frantic. The voice of a woman who only calls when she needs something. "Can you talk to Bryce? He listens to you. He always has." I held the phone against my ear and looked out my kitchen window at the parking lot of my apartment complex. You laughed in my face, Tessa. You called my daughter ordinary. Call a tutor. She started crying. I hung up. The next week, Roy called. The boy needs support, Hadley. He's in over his head up there. I gave support once, Dad. $47,000 worth. How's that working out? He hung up on me. That was fair. We were even on phone hang-ups. The truth about Bryce's problem wasn't intelligence. That kid had a 1520 SAT and a brain that could have carried him anywhere. The problem was pressure. Roy had taken the entire weight of the Dawson family legacy and dropped it on the shoulders of a 19-year-old freshman who just wanted to study and make friends and figure out who he was. Bryce wasn't failing because he was stupid. He was buckling because an old man's broken pride was strapped to his back. I felt something for Bryce. A real ache. That kid didn't steal anything. His mother and grandfather did. He was collateral damage, carrying a debt he never signed for. The same way Megan had carried a loss she never earned. Two cousins on opposite ends of a decision they didn't make. Bryce called me directly a week later. Aunt Hadley, I don't think I belong here. Megan's first year of ROTC, top of her physical training class. Dean's list both semesters. An email from her one Tuesday night that I have kept in my inbox ever since. Mom, my sergeant said I have quiet command. He said some cadets are loud and some cadets are steady, and the ones who fly helicopters need to be steady. He said I might be the steadiest person he's ever trained. I read that email 4 times at my kitchen table. Then I printed it and put it on the refrigerator next to both spreadsheets. Flight training was confirmed for her junior year. Her instructor filed a note in her file. Natural spatial awareness. Uncommon composure under simulated stress. I remembered the 8-year-old girl at the Wright-Patterson fence line, standing still for 3 hours while the rotors shook the air above her head. She was always ready. The world just hadn't caught up. I hadn't told anyone in the family about ROTC. Not Roy, not Patrice, not Tessa, not a single cousin. My daughter was building something quietly and carefully the same way she had always built things. And I wasn't going to hand that information to people who would either dismiss it or try to claim credit for it. I wasn't hiding her. I was keeping her safe from the same people who'd emptied her savings account and called it an investment. Some nights I sat on my couch after work and thought about my father standing at that kitchen table, certain and tall, his voice flat with conviction. Your girl will never need it. I thought about those words more than I should admit, but by then, the words had changed shape in my head. They weren't a wound anymore. They were fuel, and my daughter was burning it. End of Bryce's sophomore year, Patrice called. Her voice was the kind of flat that comes after someone has already cried themselves out and is now reporting facts. Bryce had dropped out of Yale. Anxiety, depression, panic attacks during finals, so severe a professor had to walk him out of an exam room. Snorts. He'd seen 2 therapists and a psychiatrist in 6 months, and every single one said the same thing. This young man is carrying a weight that isn't his. $47,000 was gone. No degree. No refund. 22 months at an Ivy League school and a transcript full of incompletes. Tessa sobbed into the phone when she told someone at a family gathering he was supposed to change everything. Roy went silent for weeks. Patrice said he sat in his den staring at the framed Yale acceptance letter and didn't speak to anyone. I want to be honest here. There was no joy in this for me. None. There is no satisfaction in watching a kid collapse under a weight someone else stacked on him. Bryce was 21 years old, and the adults who were supposed to protect him had used him as a vessel for their own broken ambitions. The same way they'd used Megan's money as a fund for someone else's dream. The math was ugly and simple. $47,000 bought 22 months at Yale and a dropout letter. $0 bought Megan a full-ride ROTC scholarship and a flight training slot at the University of Cincinnati. My father bet on the deserving one. The ordinary one bet on herself. And the numbers, as they always do, told the truth. If you're watching this thinking about someone who was written off too soon, someone labeled ordinary who turned out to be anything but, hit subscribe. Megan's story isn't over. Not by a long way. 3 years passed. The way years pass when someone you love is building something extraordinary and you are watching from the stands. Which is to say, they passed too fast and not fast enough. Megan graduated from the University of Cincinnati with a Bachelor of Science in Aviation. She was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. She was selected for initial entry rotary wing training at Fort Novosel, Alabama, which is where the Army sends the people it trusts to fly its helicopters. I drove 8 hours to Alabama, packed a cooler with sandwiches and a thermos of coffee, and drove straight through because the commissioning ceremony started at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was going to be in the front row if I had to sleep in the parking lot. She walked across the stage in her dress uniform, chin level, shoulders squared, and I sat in a folding chair in the front row with my hands in my lap and my purse on the floor. And inside that purse, folded into quarters, was the original spreadsheet from my refrigerator. Every deposit, every month, every line ending in 0. I brought it because it felt right to close the loop in person, to have that piece of paper in the room when my daughter walked into the life it was supposed to pay for. I didn't cry at her commissioning. I'd used up all my tears at kitchen tables and in parked cars, and on Tuesday nights reading emails from a girl who never asked anyone for permission to be remarkable. I sent invitations to Roy and Patrice, formal, proper, an olive branch, or a test, depending on how you looked at it. They didn't come. I looked at their empty chairs, and I stopped looking. 14 months later, Fort Novosel, Alabama, Army Aviator Wing ceremony. Megan had completed flight school and qualified on the UH-60 Blackhawk, the same helicopter that had been taped to her bedroom wall since she was 12. I drove to Alabama again. 8 hours, same cooler, same thermos. This time, I didn't need the front row because I already knew what I was going to see. The ceremony hall was packed with families, big families, loud families, groups of 8, 10, 15 people with balloons and poster board signs and matching t-shirts that said things like, "Fly high, Jackson," and "Williams family proud." I sat in my chair, one purse, one woman from Dayton, Ohio, who had driven all night because her daughter was about to receive a pair of wings. Megan walked across the stage, received her wings, turned to face the audience, scanned the rows, found my face. She nodded. Just that. A nod. I flew, Mom. Not shouted. Not even spoken aloud. Mouthed. But I heard it like a rotor cutting air. After the ceremony, she found me in the lobby. I hugged her. She hugged back. She said, "I invited the person who earned it. Just you." Every other family had 10 people clapping. Megan had 1. She told me later that was enough. That evening, I posted one photograph on Facebook. Megan in her flight suit, Army Aviator wings pinned to her chest, standing in front of a Blackhawk. No caption, no explanation. No, "Look what my daughter did despite what you did to her." Just the photo. Within an hour, Roy saw it. Patrice saw it. Tessa saw it. Half the Dawson family saw it. Nobody commented. The photo did its own talking. Year 5 after the theft, and the universe had finished being patient with my sister. Tessa's unraveling happened in stages, like a building condemned floor by floor. Her second husband left and took his income, and left behind $60,000 in credit card debt that was in both their names. Tessa panicked and put $25,000 from a home equity line into a cryptocurrency scheme that a man she met at a gas station told her would triple her money in 90 days. It did not triple. It vanished. The bank foreclosed on her house in Cincinnati. Bryce was 24 by then, working retail at a hardware store, barely covering his own rent, unable to help. Tessa couch surfed for 3 months. Friends, then acquaintances, then people who were really just strangers being polite, then a women's shelter off Route 42. Roy tried to help. Social Security and a fixed pension don't stretch the way they used to. He gave her $2,000. It was gone inside a month. Spent on what? I don't know and didn't ask. Patrice called me on a Sunday evening. Her voice had that particular weariness that mothers develop when they've spent decades managing their husband's decisions and have finally run out of energy to pretend those decisions were wise. "Your sister needs help, Hadley. She's got nothing." I listened. I let the silence sit. "I needed help 7 years ago, Mom. You chose silence, Hadley. Please." I stopped being the family emergency fund the day they emptied the real one. I hung up, not with anger, with a clarity that had taken 7 years to sharpen. I had spent my whole life being the reliable one, the one who showed up, the one who absorbed. I was done absorbing. Roy's body had started keeping the same kind of accounts his bank did, deficits that couldn't be ignored, Early-stage heart failure. Cardiology appointments in Dayton every 2 weeks. Patrice never learned to drive, had never needed to because Roy had always been the one behind the wheel, the one in charge, the one who decided where they went and when. Tessa was couch surfing and couldn't be reached half the time. The only stable person within 50 miles was me. I agreed on terms. I called Roy and I laid it out the way I'd lay out a client engagement at Morrison and Birch. Clear and without sentiment. I'll drive you to your appointments. I'll pick up your prescriptions. I will not give you money. I will not pretend that what you did was right. And I will not sit at your kitchen table and play family. He accepted because he had no other option, which is a different thing than acceptance. Twice a month, I picked him up at the farmhouse and drove him to the cardiologist in Dayton. 35 minutes each way. The car rides were mostly quiet. Roy looked out the window at the Ohio farmland rolling past, the fields and the silos and the flat gray sky. And he said nothing, and I said nothing. And the silence between us was not comfortable, but it was honest. One drive in February, stopped at a red light on Route 48, he spoke. "How's Megan?" "She's doing well. Nothing more." He nodded. Light turned green. I drove. Guilt doesn't always look like an apology. Sometimes it looks like a man staring out a car window, asking about the granddaughter he bet against in a voice so quiet you could miss it under the sound of the heater. I dropped Roy at his front door after every appointment. I never went inside. Megan spent 2 years on active duty flying medevac missions in a UH-60 Blackhawk, and she earned every commendation the Army could hand a young aviator. She was promoted to captain. She received an Army Achievement Medal for a night extraction in conditions her commanding officer later described as zero visibility, high wind, and frankly inadvisable. When I asked her about that night, she said, "It was fine, Mom. The instruments worked." Year 7 after the theft, Megan separated from the Army and joined Life Flight Air Medical as a civilian EMS helicopter pilot based out of Columbus, Ohio. She flew trauma patients from accident scenes to hospitals. She flew children from rural clinics to surgical centers. She flew people who were dying to the people who could save them. And she did it with the same quiet composure her sergeant had identified in her first semester of ROTC. I visited her apartment for the first time that October. Small. Clean. A 1-bedroom near the airport with big windows facing the runway. On her living room wall, Army aviator wings framed. Beside them, a yellow sticky note pressed under glass. "I'll fly, Mom." "I kept it," she said when she saw me looking. That's the only acceptance letter that mattered. She had just been offered an operations supervisor role at Life Flight, leading a team of pilots. At 25, the youngest supervisor in the company's history. I stood in my daughter's apartment, and I looked at her wings and her sticky note, and I thought about a savings account that once held $47,000 and a kitchen table where a man decided her future was worth less than his pride. Megan mentioned the family reunion being planned for August. I felt something tighten behind my ribs. "That sticky note cost $0, I said. She smiled. Patrice was organizing the reunion. A full Dawson family gathering at the farmhouse. First one in years. Roy's health was the engine behind it. The unspoken acknowledgement that he might not get another summer, another August, another afternoon sitting in a lawn chair watching his family eat barbecue in the field where he taught his grandchildren to throw footballs. 40-plus people were invited. Cousins from Indiana, uncles from Kentucky, aunts who hadn't spoken to each other since a dispute about a pie recipe at a church social in 2009. I hesitated. I hadn't been to a family event at that farmhouse since the send-off party I wasn't invited to, the one that celebrated Bryce going to Yale on my daughter's money. 7 years of silence and car rides to cardiologists and spreadsheets on refrigerators. And now my mother wanted me to eat potato salad in the same field where my family had written me off. Megan called on a Wednesday evening. "Are you going?" "I don't know." "Go, Mom. You're 4 hours away and you work weekends." I said I'll try to make it. Something in her voice. Calm. Certain. The same tone she used when she said, "I'll figure it out," at 17, standing in our kitchen, dry-eyed and steady. The same tone she used before every decision she'd ever made that turned out to be exactly right. "Okay," I said. "I'll go." I told myself it was for closure. I told myself I was going to sit in a folding chair and eat a plate of food and prove that I could stand in that field without flinching. I didn't know what Megan was planning, but when my daughter says, "I'll try," she means, Watch me. Saturday morning. Hot. The kind of Ohio August heat that sits on your shoulders like a wet towel. I drove to Lebanon and pulled up to the farmhouse at 11. The field behind the house was already full. 43 Dawsons by my count. Folding tables draped in checkered tablecloths. A charcoal grill the size of a bathtub sending smoke into the flat white sky. Country music from a speaker balanced on a cooler. Kids running barefoot in the grass. Cousin Jerry flipping burgers. Uncle Dave asleep in a lawn chair with a newspaper over his face. The whole sprawling, complicated, infuriating organism of the Dawson family spread across a field in Lebanon, Ohio, pretending that nothing had ever gone wrong. Cousins hugged me like nothing had happened. Hadley, where you been? You look good. I hugged back, smiled, said thank you, kept moving. I found Roy in a lawn chair at the end of the longest table. He was thinner than the last time I'd driven him to the cardiologist. Oxygen cannula looped over his ears, clear tube running to a portable tank beside his chair. He nodded at me. I nodded back. I scanned for Tessa. Not there. A cousin's wife leaned over. Not sure if Tessa's coming. She's been going through some things. I got a plate, potato salad, a burger, a scoop of baked beans, found a chair at the edge of the table, sat, ate alone, checked my phone. No text from Megan. I sat and ate potato salad and waited for something I couldn't name. 1:30 in the afternoon. The sun directly overhead. Roy tapped a solo cup with a plastic spoon, and the tables went quiet the way they always go quiet when Roy Dawson wants to talk. I'd like to say a few words. Roy stood slowly, one hand on the table. The oxygen tube swayed against his chest. A family is only as strong as its investments, he said, and I set my fork down. Some of you know that a few years back we put everything behind Bryce for Yale. Tessa's boy, a Dawson at an Ivy League school. He paused for effect. He always paused for effect. Didn't work out the way we hoped, but that's what family does. You bet on each other. I felt my jaw tighten. 43 people nodded politely. Some of them knew exactly what put everything behind Bryce meant. Some of them didn't. Roy was rewriting history in real time, standing in a field with an oxygen tank and turning theft into philosophy. He raised his cup. Then a car pulled in. Old. Dented. A Honda Civic with rust along the wheel wells and a cracked windshield. The engine sounded like it was begging to be retired. Tessa got out. She was gaunt in a way that made my chest hurt, despite everything. Goodwill clothes, hair that hadn't been washed in days. She carried a plastic bag instead of a purse. She walked to the far end of the longest table, sat in an empty chair, and folded her hands in her lap and stared at the tablecloth. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Roy. She didn't look at anyone. Roy saw her. The toast died in his throat. His cup lowered. The field went awkward and still. The way a room goes still when two truths collide in public. 7 years ago, she laughed in my face. Now she couldn't look at mine. I stared at my plate, and then I heard it. Low, distant, growing. Thwop, 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 thwop. Every head turned. The sound built from the trilline. A rhythmic pulse that pressed against the air and shook the napkins off the tables. A helicopter crested the oaks at the edge of the property, red and white, the Life Flight logo gleaming on its side. It circled once, low enough that I could see the sun hit the windscreen. Then it descended straight into the backfield. The grass flattened in a perfect circle. Paper plates launched off the tables like startled birds. Roy's hat blew off his head and tumbled across the lawn, and nobody chased it because nobody could move. The engine cycled down. The rotors slowed from a blur to blades. The pilot door opened. A woman stepped out, flight suit, helmet tucked under her arm, aviator sunglasses catching the August light. She stood on the skid for 1 second, surveying the field and the 43 people standing in it with their mouths open. And then she pulled off her sunglasses, and every person in that field saw her face. Megan Dawson, 25 years old, calm as a lake on a windless morning. She stepped down from the helicopter and walked across the field toward the tables. No rush, no showmanship, no dramatic pause. Just a woman walking across the grass in a flight suit with the same quiet certainty she'd had at 8 years old, watching rotors from behind a fence. She walked straight to me. She wrapped her arms around me. She held on. I held back. I could smell engine oil and sunscreen and something metallic, and I could feel her heartbeat steady against my chest, and I could not speak. The field was silent except for the engine ticking as it cooled. Roy was standing, mouth open, bourbon trembling in his hand. Megan let go and turned to face the family. 43 Dawson staring, some with tears already running. Some laughing in the way you laugh when your brain can't process what your eyes just showed it. Kids pulling at their parents' arms, pointing at the helicopter. Cousin Linda with her hand over her mouth. Uncle Jerry still holding his burger spatula, frozen mid-flip. Uncle Jerry broke the silence first. Little Megan, you fly that thing. Megan, quiet smile, hands clasped behind her back. Yes, sir. 3 years Army medevac, now life flight out of Columbus. EMS pilot. The crowd erupted, cheering, clapping. The kids broke free and sprinted toward the helicopter. A wave of noise and movement rolled across the field, and in the center of it, Megan stood still. Roy walked toward her slowly, oxygen tube swaying. He reached for her arm. I always knew she had it in her. His voice was loud, projected, aimed at the family. Didn't I say that, Patrice? I always said that girl had something special. Patrice stood 10 feet behind him. She said nothing. Her face said everything. I watched my father try to rewrite history for the second time in 5 minutes. And I stayed silent. I did not correct him. I did not remind him what he actually said at that kitchen table 7 years ago. I didn't need to. Every person at that reunion had heard his toast 10 minutes earlier. They'd heard him say, "We put everything behind Bryce." They could do the math. Megan gently pulled her arm from Roy's grip. Polite. Clear. The way you step back from someone without making it a confrontation. She gave him a nod that was respectful and final. Then she turned toward the far end of the table, toward Tessa. Roy's voice got louder, the way it always got louder when he felt control slipping. Family invests in family. That's what I always said. He turned to the tables, addressing the crowd, trying to pull the narrative back toward himself. But the crowd wasn't looking at him. They were looking at Megan. Cousin Linda spoke from behind her plate. Come. Matter of fact. Roy, you took her college fund. Everyone knows. The field went quiet. Roy turned toward Linda, and I watched him cycle through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, anger, and something that looked like fear. That was a different situation. Looks like the same situation to me. Linda took a bite of coleslaw. You bet on the wrong horse, Roy. Murmurs rippled across the tables. Heads nodding, I shifting between Roy and Megan and back. 7 years of silence was breaking in a field in Lebanon, Ohio, and I hadn't said a single word. Roy turned to me. His face was the face of a man reaching for a rope. Tell them, Hadley. Tell them I did what I thought was right. I looked at my father. Oxygen tank. Shaking hands. The man who told me my daughter would never need it. Who said she was average. Who stood at the head of a kitchen table and delivered his verdict with the certainty of God. I gave him one sentence. You did what you thought was right. And Megan did what she knew was right. No elaboration. No raised voice. No list of grievances. One sentence and silence. Roy opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. He sat down in his lawn chair. His hands shook on the armrests. Patrice reached for his shoulder. He shrugged her off. The power inversion was complete. He gave his verdict 7 years ago. Megan gave hers today. Megan crouched down to Tessa's level at the end of the table. Tessa was sitting with her hands in her lap, staring at the checkered tablecloth. And when Megan said her name, she flinched like she'd been touched by something hot. Aunt Tessa! Tessa's eyes were red and wet, and her chin was doing that thing chins do when someone is fighting hard not to break apart in public. Megan! I'm so, don't. Megan's voice was gentle, but closed. I didn't come here for an apology. She reached into the chest pocket of her flight suit and pulled out a white envelope. She held it out. Tessa took it with both hands, shaking. Inside were 3 things: a printed job application for Life Flight Ground Operations, Dispatch Division, Columbus office, a business card from the hiring manager with a short note on the back in Megan's handwriting. She's expecting her call on Monday, and a handwritten note on a single piece of line paper. Tessa read it. Her lips moved. Her hands shook harder. She read it again. I couldn't see the words from where I stood, but Megan told me later what she'd written. You told my mom some kids are just ordinary. You were right. I was ordinary enough to show up. 10 seconds passed. Tessa put the note down on the table. Then the sound came. Not the polished crying of a woman performing grief. The raw, uncontrolled sound of a woman realizing that what she threw away 7 years ago wasn't money. It was respect. And the person she'd thrown it away from had just offered it back. 43 Dawsons watched. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Megan stood, touched Tessa's shoulder once, turned and walked back to me. Ready to go, Mom? Yeah. Let's go. We walked to my car across the field. Behind us, murmurs, voices rising, kids still circling the helicopter, a life flight co-pilot keeping watch. I could hear Cousin Linda saying something to Roy that I couldn't make out, and I could hear Roy not answering. We got in the car. I pulled out of the gravel drive and onto the county road, and we sat in silence for 5 minutes. Fields sliding past the windows, silos, power lines, the flat, familiar landscape of Southwest Ohio unfolding in every direction like a promise that some things, at least, don't change. The envelope, I said. How long have you been planning that? Since I heard she lost the house. About 6 months. You could have ignored her. Yeah. She looked out her window. But that's what they would do. I drove. She was right. That was what they would do. And Megan had spent her entire life becoming the opposite of what they would do. Here is what happened after Tessa called the hiring manager on Monday. She interviewed. She got the dispatch job. $18 an hour. Benefits. The first stable income she'd had in 2 years. She showed up every day. Roy never apologized. He stopped talking about investments. His toast at the reunion became a family punchline repeated at Thanksgiving tables for years. Always behind his back. Always with a shake of the head. Patrice called me once a month later. Her voice was careful. Your daughter is remarkable, Hadley. She always was, Mom. Silence on the line. We both knew what she meant and what she couldn't say. Bryce reached out to Megan that fall. Coffee once a month when schedules allowed. He was in trade school, studying to be an electrician. Megan told me he seemed lighter. A few weeks after the reunion, Megan's apartment balcony. Columbus at dusk. The sky streaked over the runway. Planes lifting off every few minutes into the fading light. We sat in folding chairs with mugs of coffee and watched the traffic pattern in comfortable silence. The kind of silence you earn after 7 years of hard ones. I needed to say it. I'd been carrying it since the day I found the account at zero. I need to say something. I'm sorry I couldn't protect your future. That money was supposed to be yours. Megan set her mug on the railing. Mom, you saved $200 a month for 14 years on a single income. You drove a car with no air conditioning for a year because the repair was 3 months of deposits. That is protection. You taught me what it looks like to build something when nobody's helping. She paused, looked at the planes. The money didn't make me. The spreadsheet did. Every line was a promise. You kept every single one. I looked through the balcony door into her apartment. On the wall beside her army wings and the sticky note, there was something new. A framed printout. I stood up and walked inside and stood in front of it and my breath stopped. It was my original spreadsheet. Every deposit. Every month. 14 years. The one I kept on the refrigerator. She'd photographed it, enlarged it, printed it, and framed it in a simple black frame without ever telling me. I didn't win by fighting my father. I didn't win by proving my sister wrong. I won because my daughter saw what I built and built something bigger. The people who decide your worth are usually the ones who've never built anything of their own. And the moment you stop needing their approval is the moment you finally fly. A helicopter in a field. An envelope in a flight suit. A spreadsheet on a refrigerator. $200 at a time, 14 years running. If someone in your family ever told you that your child would never need it, and your child proved them wrong without saying a word, share this with the person who believed in them. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to fight for your child's future against your own family? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next story.